I think the category of design is a little bit, I don't know if it's doing more harm than it is doing good. The name itself, the designers and their skills and their taste and their talents, that's powerful. That's useful, of course. And I can't wait to see what it will come up with once it starts to look at the new problems. But right now, the word design carries a baggage that sort of places it squarely within a paradigm of the last 2 decades, where, if you tell people design, especially digital design, they'll think of Figma, they'll think of websites, they'll think of expensive 12-week discovery sprints, they'll think of fashion designers. If you ask someone who's not in the industry, they'll think of, and I think as a term, right, the cultural baggage of the term is what is being revalued. So when people say the designers, that what they're saying is not that these people are useless and they're going to be, put away. I think what they're like noticing is that the cultural category of designer, the name that we used for this person in society, is changing, and it truly is, and I think that's a good thing, because for designers, I believe that what it accomplishes is the opening up of a new field, the opening up of a new, the clearing away of old preconceptions about the discipline, and the opening up of a new realm where we can apply our creativity.
On today's show, we have a special guest. He's the Chief UX UI Generative AI Designer at Danske Bank and the author of Ontological Design. Subject is Project, and a former architect, specialized in blending philosophy, architecture, and AI to create adaptive, human-centered designs. He's currently leading AI innovation in banking. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
So, Daniel, I saw that you started a career in architecture. How was the beginning of your career? Where did you work it? And what have you done in the beginning of your journey?
Absolutely. Yeah, many years ago, I was an architect. I studied architecture in Portugal at the University of Minho. But I was sort of always leaning much more towards the theory side, towards the speculative side. So I ended up working in a speculative architecture think tank in the Netherlands. You know, it was an easy transition for me because it was all about coming up with new spaces, new types of experiences. Ended up visualizing them a lot in VR. That was kind of the bridge out of architecture and into sort of the broader digital fields, was virtual reality. So I joined a VR agency in London for a while, where eventually I, naturally fell into UX design, right? Because if you're designing a space, if it's digital, there's really not much difference between designing a digital space that you go into in VR or designing a website or designing an app. It's all experience design, I would say. So I eventually realized that, yeah, UX combines this systems thinking that I already carried from architecture. So that helped me really accelerate my UX career. I ended up working in the industry for a little bit. Took a bit of time off at some point to write my book, where I wanted to, yeah, put all of these things down in a format, right? All of these different insights from different disciplines, and I wanted to give them one single place where they could all talk to each other and coexist. So that was the motive to write this book, and that led me to also take about 4 years ago, take a little bit of a step towards AI, where I guess we'll get into it throughout the rest of the episode, but because AI has this possibility to take in a lot of data points and organize them under a creative project. I thought that was a natural step. I eventually joined Accenture to explore conversation design, right? When you're designing the conversations that machines have with humans for certain purposes. And eventually that led me to where I am right now, where at Danske Bank, we are designing these internal AI tools to really leverage and enhance the productivity of internal employees in all of the different tasks that they run. So that's kind of the gamut or the journey that I run. from start to finish, or start to now.
So just to tapping a little bit into your book, right? So can you tell us a little bit about it and how, yeah, where that inspiration come from? And then when you mentioned just a moment ago that it was a way for you to materialize what you were experienced, like you could just put a few words into that, and then just to try to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I've had these ideas for a long time. It came, I guess, initially through a pain and a curiosity. The pain was always that even in architecture school, creatives, when they justify why they're creating a thing in a certain way, usually come up with justifications and rationales for it. But I've always felt a little bit uneasy, and I felt there was a lot of, maybe it's not the right word, I'm not going to say it, but there was a lot of talk that wasn't validated by reality in those justifications. So that always scratched me the wrong way. And then I was always very curious about how some creative fields somehow were always oriented towards producing an effect on the beholder, producing an effect on the reality of the person looking at a painting, or the person listening to the work of music, or the person walking through the building. So ontological design really came at the intersection of those things, and it's a philosophy that sees design as more than just designing objects, but about designing the people who are in a relationship with those objects, right? Some people think that design is about creating great screens, or great looking objects, or great looking spaces, or clothes. But I think that presupposes that the subject that uses those objects and the object themselves are two separate things that never meet, right? That I'm an objective beholder, or rather, a subjective person, and there's a pen or an object. Rather, I think that the subject is the feedback loop between these two things, right? This constant relationship, and that design is the project of both those things taken together. So the objects that we create end up creating us in return. The designs we make, they impact our habits, our beliefs, our identity in ways that are oftentimes either accidental or hidden or not really analyzed. And I think that also with AI, this power of design to impact the environment and to impact the subject that exists in that environment is massively enhanced. And so for me, that's I'm fully with this philosophy that I think is for me a great way to understand the possibilities of creation in the AI era and the 21st century. So that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to put this into a I wanted to articulate this. Let's put it that way.
It's quite interesting when you mention the that when you're at least the first thing that come to mind when you're like describing this the joint uh, basically the mashup between a piece of object that it was designed or like an interface or something and somebody's using it, and how those things should be viewed as something or the same thing, right? So it's basically the experience you're having with some sort of piece of design, whether it's like an interactive interface or an object, um, and that synergy between that piece of design with your experience with it. So how, yeah,
Absolutely.
it's really interesting, like this kind of blending these two things together. I think it's an interesting approach.
Absolutely, it's the feedback loop, right? That's the one. If you had to summarize my book in one sentence, is that as we design our world designs us in return, and this happens in a constant feedback loop, constantly, right? You know, the way that I've learned to use this pen has somewhat reconfigured the neurons in my brain to know and learn how to write it, and I learn how to write. The way that these glasses augment my eyes, right? If I take them off, I'll start to like not see so well, and it's different. All of a sudden, my optic nerves are enhanced by this. The same happens with my clothes and the way that my body relates to the environment. The same happens to, I mean, and this is the history of humanity. The same has happened with the invention of fire and cooking, right? The moment that primitive humans discovered that they could cook, all of a sudden they've externalized a portion of their digestive system, and all of a sudden we pre-digest food by cooking with fire, and we can eat. There's more calories available to us in the environment because you can cook like stuff that's hard and make it easy to digest, and that changed our evolutionary pathway. So it really goes deep, right? It's the what ontological design presupposes is that humans and technology are not separate things, but they're collaborating, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, in a process of artificial evolution, artificial selection for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years or more, maybe, right? So right now people, it's of our time, right? In our time, people tend to think that we are individuals in the humanist sense. We are atoms, right? There's atoms, and then you have many of atoms. You have a family, and then you have many families or many different types of families, and you have a state, or you have different communities. But what I try to look at it, or the way that I try to look at it, is that we're coupled systems. We're not separate atoms. We're always coupled with our systems. I'm coupled with this keyboard, with this screen, with this pen, with this cup that contains some coffee that has caffeine. That is so. There's this constant feedback, and that feedback has a shape, that feedback has an architecture, it has a we can design this relationship. So we're not just shaping the objects, we're shaping the extended body of the human. The body doesn't end at the edge of my skin, it continues throughout these objects, materially, socially, informationally, memes. So yeah, for me, that's the next step with UX or with design, is that we're architecting feeling and thought and action, and now with AI, like it's on, right? Whereas I wrote the book in 2020, between 2020 and 2022, and at the time it wasn't that AI or large language models were out there explicitly changing the world in the way that they are now. But now that they are, it's like we have everything we need to begin exploring these things.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to go into it. That
But
would be the
it's pretty
gist of
much interesting, and I kind of relate with. I'm an architect too, so when I saw that you're an architect, and you have this vision, I think I relate a lot with, for example, Ian Gale, that is one of the guys who said like cities for people, and this kind of stuff. So this feedback back look makes a lot of sense, and it's really interesting how you explore that in so many different ways, so you're talking about the skin, and then how your body is feeling and how you react to things. So I think it's a really interesting perspective that you're picturing. Does it come from the architecture side, or does it come with your reflections? How did you ended up like with this idea, like?
it. It certainly comes from architecture, but architecture understood not just as the design of buildings within the industry of building things, or even in the academic sphere. It's more like design or architecture as a total thing, as a Hans Hollein said, all is architecture, from the pen to the house to the window to the words to the language. That's my view. So taking design generally understood, or architecture generally understood, from artifact focused to human centered to human centric squared, where you're not just designing things in function of a human, but you're designing the human itself, which is the big statement of ontological design, right? It's that we're going to design humans. That's what I mean. So I mean, then all of a sudden, the things we design become metabolic, which there's even an architecture movement around that. It is in the shape of your metabolism, of your habits. It becomes responsive to your habits as well, right? Because it doesn't have to be static; it can be dynamic and adaptive. Um, yeah, one of the ways that I think it's really interesting to think about this is that, well, whereas previously a lot of soft sciences like sociology or ethnography or psychology or even architecture, they would make these assumptions about how humans work, but then it was a little bit of they had a bit of trouble validating them at scale, right? You could do it in contained studies that take a long time, and they're bound by the political burdens of academia and of funding and all of that. All of a sudden, like we can just do that with AI at scale on the internet. You can take qualitative insights and scale them broadly. So, I mean, that's pretty much accessible to any product team, to any influencer, to any creative right now. You can know how your users will work with your tool, and then you can just cycle that feedback again and again and again. So then we have the infrastructure for deep subjective transformation, the infrastructure for how the subject can be projected. And we as designers are the organizers of this training of subjectivity over time.
Let me just ask you in regards to designing experiences, right? Like human centered experiences. In your view, what's the difference between designing for humans and designing with humans, especially in this AI enhanced world that we're living in now?
Hmm. I guess I like to say that human centricity isn't human centric enough. Right now, it purports to be human centric, and that was the right philosophy for the last 15, 20 years of design, where it said we want to design with usability in mind, taking into account the needs of the human. And that's great, right? That's how we iterate and adapt, and that's how we've built a digital world in the last decades, and we've come very far. But I don't think it's human centric enough in that I think that's designing for humans. I think designing with humans is more about, first of all, understanding that the human itself is a part of the project. I, I am a part of a project as a designer. I have my motivations, my intentionality. I'm in the project. It's not like I'm separate from reality. I have, so that's the, I guess, motivational, no motivational element there. But then even designing on the go, iteratively with the user. So as I think designing with humans implies designing things that learn who humans are, systems that adapt, that co-evolve, that respect the complexity of who the human is. I think for until now we've lived in a world where everyone has access to the same tools. If you're a billionaire or if you're just an average person, we both have sort of iPhones. We have one interface for all. And I think soon we'll have to move to a world where these things are going to be adapted to the very needs, to the daily rhythms of the person. And the design of those systems for me is how we design with humans, um, learning the quirks and the needs of the person. Yeah, moving from mass produced apps that everybody must use to apps that adapt towards the segments that they're addressing. And I think that's the most exciting part about being a designer today, truly.
Yeah, and then do you think there's a way of like changing the interface or how AI can impact in these interfaces, like to create a unique experience, let's say, for the users? How do you see that happening, and how do you see in the future?
I mean, there's so much. There's the rule book isn't written yet. There's a lot of possibility. That's why it's fun. For example, I mean, imagine an environment where your blood chemistry is connected to the lights, the colors, and the intensity of the lights. So all of a sudden, you're more stressed, so the light gets a little bit calmer to soothe you. Or imagine that the AI is hearing for your words, for your vocabulary, and it can tell your state of spirit, your mood, right? As a designer, we would define what are the moods or the personas within the person, right? We
Yeah.
contain multitudes, they say. So you can adapt the state and the moment to that. Or even a simpler example, like um, I have an airport app, and if I'm going to the airport and I'm still at home, it will tell me the train times for getting to the airport, and maybe once it detects that I'm closer to the airport, it will tell me the gate I need to go to. So from a simple contextual adaptation towards more complex forms of adaptation that incorporate not only the logistics of the journey but also psychological states and also linguistic insights and also interaction patterns that may be hidden and may reveal insights if you crisscross them. Because then as you crisscross these different sorts of insights, I think you begin to uncover net new things. For example, psychological state per content consumed, meaning let's assume that there's a way to track my psychological state based on the words that I'm using and the patterns of my typing. Maybe we will discover that that changes based on what we show to the person. So if we show an ad about DoorDash that is like really long and it's annoying, you, maybe we can sense that the person gets frustrated. Oops. Okay, maybe we change the ad. Now you change the color, you change the story. Okay, that seems to fit more with the state of this person, with their psychography, etc. So I think that's the level of complexity that if we get to, I feel like we might uncover great insights, great applicable insights as designers, but also as product experience teams, generally speaking.
Yeah, it's interesting, like how you're thinking about the how the apps are gonna connect to each other, and I think it's super interesting, like because it kind of reminds me that you know we all as humans, as atoms and everything, like we are connected to the universe somehow because we have the same atoms as in the whole universe we have here in the earth. So it kind of reminds me that everything's already connected, but we don't see that in the line, we don't, but we feel it somehow.
I
So
love
what you're saying is like you're connecting back all this in different ways. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Like
I
it's
do. I do. That's a crazy take. I love it. It's like we're stardust. That's what Sagan just said, right? And as we reorganize stardust right now into thinking dust, right, with AI, and
yeah.
even I mean, we can create things that unlock different forms of light. I think that's a very spiritual take, actually. There's something about reconfiguring the universe, resolving things, and uncovering new forms of intelligence when we sort of reconnect the points in our environment, atoms that we are. And I think that's really
You,
Yeah.
that's the spiritual line to this.
you touched upon when we were like talking a little bit about the future of personalized experiences, right? And then AI, um, that AI allows for, or at least it's going to allow more and more. So, how do you see that future? How do you see designing dynamic and personalized interfaces? Like, because I think today our world as designers, we can there's a little bit of abstraction, but you are in control of that process. But if you externalize that to AI, and then maybe apps will be designed on the fly to fit some to fit some specific purpose, how do you see that loss of control, and how do you see that evolving as design evolves as well to actually design those?
Yeah, I think that what we will be the way that that might play out is that rather than design remaining the same and relying on the same sort of stages and components and typical steps, what will happen is that the design thinking mentality will move maybe one layer of abstraction up, and rather than spending its time designing static wireframes or static UIs that then will be handed over to a developer team who will then sort of build it and you'll test it. All of these processes from, you know, research and discovery and design and build, the timelines will compress. The timelines will be massively compressed, and all of a sudden then designers will be the orchestrators of these systems instead of creating one prototype for 4 weeks. Then with researching and designing, for example, you might make 10 prototypes in 1 week using tools like Lovable or UX Pilot or Framer or whatever. I mean, who knows, there's things coming out every day. But what this does is, because we can do old things much faster, probably will also be able to do net new things. So out of this sort of enhanced increase in quantity, there will also emerge a qualitative novelty. It's going to go so fast that it's going to create a new standard, a new baseline. So yeah, we are saving time in writing and designing and all those things, but it's I'm fascinated with the fact that it's going to create space for a deeper sort of more strategic work where you're going to be concerned with human experience at a higher level. And that's the point about ontological design, right? It's that all of a sudden we're not looking at the things, we're looking at the person. And that's a whole new.
Hey everyone, we noticed that a lot of people watching on YouTube are not subscribers. So it would help us a lot if you will click on the subscribe button down below. And for those who are listening to this episode, because we're also a podcast and we're everywhere, please leave us a review. It helps a lot to share our content and to multiply the audience. And we really, really appreciate it. It doesn't cost anything, it's free. Please leave us a review. Thank you.
World.
That kind of connects a little bit what I wanted to ask you in regards to, because there's a lot of discourse now. Every time there's a new AI tool that glimpses or at least eclipses a little bit the work of design, there's like, oh, there's the death of design, there's the death of graphic design, this like absurd discourse that is killing basically, every week there's like uh, a profession or a few that is dying. What is your take? Because based on what you just based on the conversation so far, it seems that you have a very optimistic view of what is the central role of design in this whole disruption that AI brings, right? So I just want to tap into your brain in regards to that. Where do you see design as AI evolves? It disrupts a lot of fields. Where do you see design is placed?
I think the category of design is a little bit. I don't know if it's doing more harm than it is doing good. The name itself, the designers and their skills and their taste and their talents. That's powerful. That's useful, of course, and I can't wait to see what it will come up with once it starts to look at the new problems. But right now, the word design carries a baggage that sort of places it squarely within a paradigm of the last 2 decades, where, if you tell people design, especially digital design, they'll think of Figma, they'll think of websites, they'll think of expensive 12-week discovery sprints, they'll think of fashion designers. If you ask someone who's not in the industry, they'll think of, and I think as a term, right, the cultural baggage of the term is what is being revalued. So when people say the designers, that what they're saying is not that these people are useless and they're going to be, put away. I think what they're like noticing is that the cultural category of designer, the name that we used for this person in society, is changing, and it truly is, and I think that's a good thing, because for designers, I believe that what it accomplishes is the opening up of a new field, the opening up of a new, the clearing away of old preconceptions about the discipline, and the opening up of a new realm where we can apply our creativity. So that to me signals the cultural and epistemological shift in expectations around people's roles, rather than the actual talent and skills and their application in the world.
If you have to name or list some skills that you think it's really valuable and it's going to be
Mm.
more and more important for designers to look to in this during this transformation, and what would you say is critical for designers to upskill at this transitional period?
Um, I think there's it's a period of experimentation. I think tools like Lovable, for example, or learning tools like Lovable or Wevo that accelerates research, or others like playing with those tools. It creates a very wow moment, a very like aha moment, where all of a sudden what you used to do is being done way faster. That allows you to experiment faster, to see the outcomes of your experiments way faster. I don't have to wait 7 weeks to get a prototype that I can test with users. I can do it in 1 day or two. And I would urge designers to just do that and then follow whatever their intuition and their excitement leads them to. Um, there will be designers who will be using this to maximize the way they do research, find new use cases, optimize tools massively. I mean, who knows? It's still an open field. But that's the great thing about there not being a real rule book. You can write the rule book. So my thing is get into the tools and use them and use them to empower you to see new things. Like you yourself are the one being amplified. For me personally, but and that's that I don't know that this applies generally to other designers, but my feeling has always been to lean into understanding culture and behavior and systems and the insights that data can give us behind why people do their things. And I think that's going to be so cool when we're able to understand what kind of people love the yellow ad more than the blue ad and why, and where's the data, and what design interventions might we make to connect that data, and what adaptive systems might we create around that. That's my personal take, but we'll see. Just get in and build is the top advice, because building is like sunlight. It disinfects all the bad habits because it self-corrects. It corrects bad vices very quickly because you're wrestling with the principle of reality, and continually learning. So get in there and build stuff and test it.
And what do you think are the some of the biggest misconceptions of designers, like having working with these tools, especially AI tools?
I think, yeah, as you said, that as Daniel mentioned, there's a myth that AI is our competitor, that it's going to push us away. I think the reality is that it's going to accelerate whatever we do. And so who knows what's going to happen to this label of designer, right? It hasn't been around in the digital industries, at least, for that long anyway. Right? We had web designers, and then we had UX UI and UX research. Who knows what's going to happen now? But that's one of the big misconceptions. People think of it as it's going to steal our jobs, whereas truly it's just going to change it. And change is the thing that's been happening for ages. Or I think there's one misconception that is a bit that I like, that I've noticed, is that people tend to say that, oh, humans have the human touch, and that's something special and spiritual that will always be present, and it's something inherent in us that humans will always keep. And I think not. I think that's a little bit of a just talk, because like I think I think of it in this way, right? The creative industries have had, oftentimes they have this phenomenon where you have a creative person expressing an asymmetrical amount of talent and value with regards to their clients. The creative guru, the architect who is a little bit flamboyant and loves to be provocative. And that the moat is precisely the fact that people perceive that person to have that special something, to have the special taste, to the touch of God that allows them to be like King Midas. And that's why we pay them a lot of money to do their buildings or their designs. But I think that asymmetry that they used to have there is closing, because everybody can do what they do or copy it, or the field is changing. So that asymmetry has to go somewhere else.
The
Um,
famous
and that's one of the
the famous talent, right? Where if you have the talent, it's almost like a gift that came out of nowhere, and then also attached to ego, just creates this myth that everything is like you're destined. It's not
absolute.
something that you actually grow, or it's not something that you learn, right? Which is a misconception.
No, absolutely. And I think that's going to disappear. I think the architecture industry especially is very riddled with that top heavy hierarchical guru cult. Uh, that's going away. It's probably not the worst thing in the world. But the fun thing is to see, okay, what are we now going to do given that all of these tools of creativity are democratizing what we thought to be the exclusive prerogative of these gurus? Because, as I said, human taste is not something special or inherent or ineffable. We can model it, we can break it down into 1,001 little components. systematically. And then the question becomes, what do we do with this, with these renewed creative possibilities? And that's what I'm interested in.
It is also,
And I
sorry,
think
go ahead.
just to recap a little bit, because you said about architecture, and I feel that it is kind of something that architects assume. They assume that they know how people will behave in the space, and sometimes there's no studies about it. So it's something that, as I said, like they're kind of gurus. They know, we know, I know how people will behave, so I'll put this bench here, this pathway here, and this stuff like that. So I kind of totally relate with architecture when you mentioned that, and it was
And it's a bit political too, right? Because every regime must have its champions of culture. It's people who are the ones supposed to know, who get all the awards, who show up and they pretend to know things. But I think now that we can actually measure those things, that we can actually measure the effects of our designs with data, with computer vision, with linguistic analysis, with heat maps, with interaction tracking. All of a sudden, you can draw empirical conclusions that completely blow the guru shtick out of the water. And I think, I'm not unhappy to celebrate it. I think that this is the beginning of what philosopher Alexander Barth calls the sensocracy. Sensocracy means the government by censors, meaning that to a great extent, creative decisions that used to be the province of an enlightened guru can be validated with all of these censors. And as I say, it's not like the guru is dead. I think that the great, beautiful creativity that's going to happen is going to be to move up one layer in abstraction and look at all of this actual data, lose the lose the lose the shtick, lose the sort of the performative theatricality of it, which will reemerge again because we're humans and we like to do that. But just embrace the new possibilities, and I think that's going to breathe a lot of fresh air into architecture, into design, into reality itself, and I think that's a good thing.
I'd like to dive in a little bit into how you're actually bringing this your view to Danske Bank and how you're bringing AI to a very let's say old school institution, right? Because banks, by definition, I guess most of them are sitting in like years of tradition and legacy systems. So how you're bringing this novel technology to your day-to-day life, how it is actually impacting the design process internally. Can you just give us a little bit of a
Absolutely. So I think Danske Bank did something really interesting, which is banks are not known for being innovative, but what they've done is they've quickly made a case, studied a case, uh, done a lot of benefit realization around predicting, okay, how might we realize the value of AI in numbers? Like, if we start to adopt these tools, is it going to be, are we going to make money, save time? What's the opportunity? What's the opportunity cost of not getting into it? And they've decided to, let's go in. So what we're doing right now, and I'm leading the design within this Gen AI tribe, is the bank has created this tribe. We're about between 50 and 70 people, something like that, of all sorts of roles and skills to implement AI internally. It is also going to be implemented externally for customer service, but I'm currently focusing on the internal side of things. And what we're doing is really rolling out series of platforms and tools for internal employees, currently adopted by 10,000, and that number is growing, that saves time for their writing, for their coding, for their translating, for their brainstorming. And in an organization, if your developers are using AI, maybe they're doing twice the work in the same amount of time. So that's a saving of time right there. And that's a saving of money as well. And as you can imagine, there's so many different roles within banking, right? So many different, it's not like there's three or four skills. There's many minute and heavily detailed roles around regulation, around um, many different employees roles. So the point is bringing AI to all of these small use cases is pretty much what I'm doing. and it's very fun. And I think that that's also a very good bet of Danske Bank to be like, okay, let's bring AI here and let's realize its gains now, and let's be in a good position to keep rolling with the waves as we expect the technology to keep developing.
Are you developing your own models internally? Are you? Can you disclose that? You know,
Of course, this is public. So what's happening is that we're giving employees access to a version of OpenAI's ChatGPT tools models, but adapted to the bank's specific security requirements. And that means that no data flows back to OpenAI happen when people use the tools. So that's a really important regulatory aspect that we're being very responsible with. I think that's perhaps the most unique feature of doing AI at a bank is that there's these compliance and regulatory things that we need to pay attention to, which makes complete sense to be honest. But I wouldn't say that that's even a blocker or something that slows us down. I think it's simply due diligence and just another requirement that as designers we need to take care of, and just putting this in the hands of people and seeing how much more productive they get to be, and listening to what their complaints are or what they would like to see better based on their day-to-day use cases. It's a good thing. It's a fun thing.
are you offering some internal training as well?
Yeah, massively. So there's a lot of change management activities that include training, that include a lot of feedback gathering and research, understanding how do the different people and different types of employees use the tool. So making sure that we realize that potential in connection with users as best practices recommend in the world of design and digital product experience, right? You want to make sure you're building things people need, not just cool stuff.
And it makes a lot of sense, like to have some tool that helps you to write, because probably some of the terms and some of the things that you're sending to the clients, they are kind of the same for many different ones. And so contracts, they just need some refinement, but they're mostly the same. So if you make it easier for people to use it and to do this refinement, it makes a lot of sense. Like you probably like
Yeah.
saving a lot of money and save a lot of time. They're doing these standardizations through these platforms, and
No,
not
absolutely.
standardizations, but yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, the every different sort of employee type and role has its unique need. So it's fascinating to see how some people need a lot more writing, some people need a lot more coding, some people need a lot more writing of a particular type. Looking at all these different things, so there's variability, but in doing that, there's also tremendous gains for each in person.
Eh, How was the implementation like of these tools? Like, did you felt like some? Did you felt that the employees had some barriers, or they were not prepared? How was the how can I say, how did you broke these barriers with the employees? Did you find it easier? Did people already use it for their personal like
There's
things?
different personas. There's different types of people. Some folks are really advanced and experts, and they use AI in their own lives as well. ChatGPT tools in their personal lives and so on. Others are not. Others, are happy to learn, are happy to lean into the tools and into the sessions that we run for clarification, for training, because they also see the value. It's very self evident with AI. It's one of those moments that being in technology for a few years in the beginning. eh, Let me put it this way: it's very refreshing to see people have wow moments on such a regular basis because AI provides those reliably. Because it is truly like making your life better. Whereas before, you had to kind of justify why this technology is going to be useful for you. Right now, you send them a link. Show, don't tell, and I like that. So um, I think that's part of how the adoption has been followed by employees. The value is self-evident, and then it's a matter of refining and exploring and learning what might we make with this, how to make the best out of this new technology.
And did your work like is it only for internal use, or for example, are you trying some tools to make it the users of the, for example, the app of the bank, like easier, or their own interfaces and stuff?
I'm not involved in that. I know that other people are. But I'm focused more on internal employee experience and building these tools out for the internal employees.
Oh, nice, nice. And how do you see, like, in the next 5 or to 10 years, like how the AI will power like this design and all these processes? Do you feel that?
Within the bank or more generally?
Yeah, I think you can say both. Like in the bank, like in your work, do you think it's gonna be easier? Like it's gonna be developed, or
I think in the short term, there will be changes to the design process and the types of things that it can create in terms of tools, especially as we bring in a lot of these new tools into our design process. But also, I think after a certain time, I don't know if it's going to come in 5 years or 10 years. I think that categories are going to be the thing changing. The cultural label of designer might change. The cultural label of banking might change. Who knows if it's going to be something that is a little bit more connected to lifestyle, or given that there's so much, banking feeds into every aspect of life. The financial aspect of technology feeds into every aspect of life. So it could very well be that there's a shift there as well, to companions, to assistants, so that establish a different kind of relationship between institutions and people, between technology and tools and the people. And I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that front, but I will say that more than just the short-term change in the routines and tasks of the discipline, within the discipline, and the disciplines around product, there might also happen that the very labels and ways we address disciplines and products and industries might be shaken up a little bit.
When you mention do you see that the design process will change? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Where do you see where we are now, and where do you see that changing?
Well, as I've mentioned, I think the things I can see right now include the ability to much more quickly create prototypes, that allows you to just go out and test these prototypes with people much faster, much quicker. So all of a sudden, you're in a communion with your testers much more frequently, as opposed to in a more cyclical, infrequent way. So I think that, yeah, one of the things is, instead of creating one product in 10 weeks, you create 10 products in 1 week. And then you can increase the rate of innovation through that. You can also increase the rate of innovation by quick research. So tools like Wevo allow you to talk to simulated audiences. So instead of having to go and run qualitative studies very frequently, which are always very good, but they take up time. Sometimes the decisions you want to test are smaller. So these tools allow you to just, as if you were asking ChatGPT, is this button better? Is this button better? These tools answer those questions based on, of course, their data and the way they've studied the users. So all of a sudden, another cycle gets sped up. And, I've mentioned speeding up research, speeding up prototyping. In the build side, my more technical colleagues will tell you that using tools or coding assistance is also speeding up a lot of the work they do. They still are in the loop. It's still important to validate what AI is creating. We're still not at a point, and I don't know that we'll ever be, of putting these tools in front of users directly from AI. But within bigger institutions, the fact that there's so much time saving here will have to change how they create products. And one thing that is also happening that you'll notice is that there's a lot of individual indie hackers just taking advantage of these things and putting out a product a week online, and replacing the traditional startup and innovation scene with very bootstrapped AI enhanced innovate startup entrepreneurship. So you have like small teams with not too many people that by leveraging AI, go much further than they could 10 years ago, especially without much money up front. So that's another way that it's changing, and it's changing live, and it's good to see, and it's exciting and mind blowing to see things that used to take months and big amounts of money getting done in weeks by skilled people, and that's beautiful to see.
You mentioned Vivo. You were a board advisor of the company.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what is the company about and what is your role? I think you mentioned a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more?
Wevo is audience intelligence. So by being able to tap into a huge amount, I think millions of test cases and use cases, and embedding that into an AI tool, you're able to upload your designs pretty much into Wevo and ask questions about how an audience might respond to it. Or you can ask questions about how a segment might respond to it. And it helps you safeguard your design bets, de risk your design or product choices much faster. And it reduces the amount of time spent actually validating those things with users, with focus groups, with research. Um, in a nutshell, that's what it does. And I'm board advisor. I often help the team come up with the next iteration of products, or um, with ideas and insights and so on. And I think that it's such a natural connection to ontological design, and it's been really cool to collaborate with them, because I think it's the next iteration of human centricity. It's what will allow us to be more human centric than we've been in the last 15 to 20 years. Because all of a sudden you're like, okay, how deep can I look into the one particular user or to the segment? And in how many parameters might this persona be created? And how actually valid and empirically demonstrated that persona is, as opposed to just an assumption that they like yellow, who knows? So being able to actually test those things in the detail with the data, with the evidence, and then bring that into the design process fast in convenient way for designers. That's pretty much the promise, and a very beautiful one at that.
I think that's amazing because I feel that, for example, in as we mentioned in architecture, but it reflects on marketing and many other fields. We just assume that this persona will be like that, and then when you validate in the market, it's never exactly how you picture. Eh,
Absolutely.
And it's so hard, for example, in marketing to focus in one and to be assertive and you make it right. So I feel that these tools can help a lot, like to make it the right tool for the right person. So
Yeah, to de-risk your bets, instead of having to try 10 times and then learn slowly, you try two or three times and maybe you learn way faster. And that's a huge time saving. It's yeah, I mean, that's the big value proposition, I think, or one half of the value proposition as far as I see it, which is time reduced. The second part is net new ways to be more precise, precise like you couldn't ever have been before, with messages that are tailored to a person, like we couldn't have done in the past. And I think that's also that's the new frontier for creativity, because I think with AI, it's not just about the economical and time saving gains, which are really important, but also like, okay, here's new stuff that you can do. Go create.
We're reaching a little bit the end of our episode. I just wanted to conclude with asking you, just thinking a little bit about the future, right? Or at least the near future, because those things, I think, they are evolving and growing so fast, right? Every week is like there's some news coming out that is very disruptive, or you know, one company is beating benchmarks of others. So it's like the competition is fierce because these things can grow and evolve really fast, right? So do you believe we're AI is going to be as having a smartphone in a couple of years from now? And then how do you see that, our interaction with it? How do you see that? Just extrapolating a little bit into the future, and what is your perspective there?
Hmm. I think yes. I think it's going to I think it already is in many hidden ways embedded within our lives and our environment. What appears to be shocking in the news cycle, in the hype cycle, will become normalized in 2 weeks. So that's usually how it works with technology. I mean, we're having a call through the internet on right now, whereas a few years ago when we were young, it was kind of wild as an assumption that we would be able to do this. And so things get normalized. People get used to it and integrate it into their life and culture very quickly. I just think that, my vision is that it's going to create a world where, in a time of machines, I like to think that I want to double down on the human. In the time of machines, double down on the human, on how things emerge and how we might manage the emergence of those things, those ideas, those messages in society, because the technological barrier for a lot of things is being removed. So anyone can do a lot of things now all of a sudden. So I don't, personally as a designer, I think I'm not gonna focus on the technology aspects of things, but how that technology applies to human use cases, that service layer between the sort of the models and the beautiful things they do, and particular use cases and everyday things that might require that type of enhancement. And doing so not just with an economic, let's save time, let's speed up processes point of view, but also with a point of view of how much more deeper might we take our creativity. And for me, that means redesigning subjectivity itself, redesigning how people believe. And it's a weird thing to say, right? Because ethically, it feels a little bit strange to say that we're going to design people's psychology. There's people that have been doing that and are doing that right now. We know that. But to take that from, the product development or the algorithm development department at Instagram and bring that into the center of the design discipline as something that design is about, I think is the move. Is know your audience, have intelligence about who they are, have intelligence about how to read the analytics that tell you who they are. Why is the data telling you this? What's the psychological angle? What's the anthropological angle? What's the ethnographical angle? What's the sociological angle? What's the creative interpretation angle? Maybe the gurus will take care of that. I think that's a good move, right? I mean, just beautiful insights. Like, did you know that? Okay, this is a politicized thing that I'm going to say, so I'm going to give two examples. Apparently, Grinder downloads go up in the Republican conventions in America. Also, it appears that it is liberal women who are the biggest consumers of serial killer fiction, like in podcasts. I think these 2 points are like provocative statements that are data backed, but are provocative about like, hey, what's going on here? What's that? What's this? And I love that. I love that about the future of design, because now those are probably the things we're going to have to look into. It's the psychological ramifications of these adaptive systems. And okay, what does it tell us about the person? How might we integrate that into our strategy, into our product, into our vision for who and how we design? Because as I said, the things we design aren't just going to affect us as in a purely utilitarian way, as per the humanist philosophy of the last 70 years, right? Objects, subjects, different. No, I think they're going to be embedded in us. They're going to change how we believe, how we feel, how we produce emotion around things. So that's what I'm bullish about in the next years, and let's hope that that it takes place like that, because I think also design is a way to defend ourselves from the unintended consequences of these things, because there are many, and we can probably already see plenty of them around. But I like to stay positive, and I like to think that in a world where you can either design or be designed, I like to think that, yeah, let's learn so that we can be conscious about what's happening.
Awesome. I think it's a great way to end like that. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us. And where can people find you online?
Uh, I'm present on LinkedIn. Just look for Daniel Fraga design. I think you'll find me there. And that's kind of my main platform for how I put my work out there. I'll update that in the future. But I think just follow me on LinkedIn, and that's going to be the main way to keep a track of what I'm doing.
Awesome. We're going to put the links in the show notes.
Just to mention, I think you have a newsletter, isn't it? If you wanna, we can put it in the show notes. The newsletter
Yeah,
link.
yeah. Just it's on my LinkedIn, so you can just subscribe through it. And I frequently just post some musings and some ideas around philosophy, design, artificial intelligence, and humans. At the end of the day,
Nice.
Awesome. Thanks again. It was a really
thank
fun
you.
conversation. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It's free and helps us a lot. This way, it can help us also reach new listeners. Oh, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to stay up to date on our latest episodes. If you have any questions for us, reach out to us at hello@humanaixp.com or connect with us on Instagram. Thanks for listening. See you next week.